Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Myers. Thank you so much for joining the Live to 110 podcast. You can find me and learn more about me at live to110.com. Today we have my friend Diane Kaiser on the podcast. She's going to be talking about finding the courage to be happy. And it's something a lot of us don't allow ourselves to be happy. We can be really hard on ourselves and have that critical inner voice and really create a lot of obstacles for ourselves to be happy. So we're going to be talking about strategies that you can use to have more joy in your life. But please keep in mind that this podcast is for informational purposes only. Please consult your healthcare practitioner before engaging in anything that we suggest today on the show. The Live to 110 podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Our guest, Diane Kaiser, she's the doctor's nutritionist. She helps clients all around the world, but most specifically in Orange County in California, where many doctors entrust their patients to her to teach them self-love through nutrition, meditation, fitness, and fulfilling their dreams. With a 7-year clinical background and lifelong experience, Diane is a passionate expert on reversing autoimmune disease, detoxification, natural fertility, digestion challenges, and energy upgrades. She's written programs and ebooks to teach her clients how to thrive, such as the Sexy Belly Guide, Hashimoto's Guide to Reversing Autoimmune Disease, and the Warrior Cleanse. They were born through her own health struggles, which she reversed through the tenets that she teaches. Her recent passion project is the Heart to Happiness Summit, where she brings together 25 experts from around the world to enlighten us to a greater version of ourselves through the heart to find happiness and reconnect with each other and our purpose. Her little tagline is that she helps conscious, successful women detox divine draining toxins out of their lives so they can reverse disease, supercharge their potential, and look and feel stunning so that they can focus on their dreams and follow their heart with reckless abandon. Hey, wait a second, that's my tagline. Diane, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Wendy. It's always a pleasure with your beautiful face.
Yeah, well, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit, about yourself and your story?
Oh, yeah, I know that's kind of open-ended, but easy answer. A lot of people actually, I find, they find it hard to talk about themselves, and I think that they feel as though it's egotistical or that they're bragging. But I chose a different approach. I think it's important for us to celebrate our victories and for us to celebrate other people's victories too. I really think that a tiny percentage of the population really is able to celebrate with other people because they are happy about themselves, which is what we'll talk about today. But my past, I mean, I guess the biggest, how would I identify with myself as a kid? I started playing soccer when I was 4. I became obsessed with unicorns at that time, which is my spirit animal and helps me, connect with the playful side, the adolescent side of me that makes me, the innocent, young, loving girl that, when I'm becoming more of a powerhouse woman, I'm in my ego, I just pull out my little unicorn. It reminds me of, the sweet and divine and gentleness of myself. So I could, be the more of a woman, because we're being asked to be more manly, I guess. We have more manly roles. And that, for me, at the age of 4, I started playing soccer, and then I became a pro soccer player and got scholarships to play soccer as well in my teenage years. And I traveled to play soccer in the Bundesliga in Germany. I played pro soccer in the United States. And so, playing that role and being the defender, I was mama bear protecting my team. And so I became like this warrior, but then it was too much on the dominant, male side. That energy was so holding tight, aggressive. And so I kind of lost that feminine side of myself. And then when I was 22, I became a financial planner. So at an early age, I didn't really get to go out and do younger kid things. I became serious. I started my financial planning practice. 8 years later, I sold that, became a nutritionist. And now I'm a functional diagnostic nutritionist like you. And I like to help people get toxicity out of their life, be it their toxic thoughts or, toxic chemicals or toxic food, toxic people, which is so important too, toxic pastime, things that aren't serving them. just really in general, getting the crap out of our lives that plagues us and pulls us down and that takes us, robs us of our happiness. So, the story of me is how this project that we're going to talk about came to be. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And I'm 37 years old now, and I guess you could say I'm living my dream.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your project. You have an upcoming project called Habits to Harbor Happiness. And you chose to talk about depression. I think it's really important because I suffered from depression for many, many years. And you always wonder why? Why am I depressed? Especially when your life seems to be going really well, which at one point in my life was amazing. And I thought, why am I not happy? And let's talk about some of the, underlying causes of depression.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so um, I'm actually at my parents' house right now visiting my mom for Mother's Day when we're recording this. And this is my little heart that I gave to her when I was younger. Mom, thank you for always believing in me. I love you. And I had a little heart with me every time I interviewed people, including yourself, which you air on June 4th. So everybody's got to tune into yours. Yours is a very powerful interview as toxicity, as a roadblock to happiness. So the Heart to Happiness project is to remind ourselves that in order for us to achieve happiness, we need to use our hearts as a vessel. And I forgot to incorporate one piece or two pieces of my story, which is that I too was depressed like you, and completely lost. On the outside, it would look like, oh, well, you have everything going for you. You've got this, you've got money, you've got a BMW, you've got a horse, like you've got boys who want to date you. It's like, well, how dare you? Oh my God, look at you. Like, no, it's not, it's what's going on inside of ourselves. It's 90% of our happiness is not predicted by what's happening in our external world, but by the way that our brain processes the world, the way we experience the world, the interface through which we interact with others, the lenses through which we see life, the way that we respond to life. Are we grateful? Are we stressful? What is it? And childhood programming. There's all these different reasons that people might be depressed today. So I can say for myself, because I like to be, I'm like you, I like to speak for the people. And, we've got a lot of people in our practice, and you start to see trends, like, gosh, this is it's not just me depressed. It's not just females depressed. It's like a lot of people, it's kids, a lot of kids are on antidepressants too. And so I started doing yoga when I was 20. Because at that time, that's when I noticed that I was depressed. I wasn't happy with myself. That was right around the time that in college, when I got recruited to play soccer, I went from this all-star, California State VIP MVP athlete to being benched on the soccer field in college, and that destroyed me. Politics destroyed me, and my heart hurt, and I drank a lot of alcohol to try to numb that because I didn't know how else to deal with it. I wasn't equipped for whatever reason to respond to that external stressor of other people's judgment of my value. And so I gave my power away. And I see a lot of people doing this. We give our power away from the judgment of other people and what they think about us or say about us. But that's really, truly at the bottom of it based on their judgment of themselves. When we're hard on ourselves, we're hard on other people too. And so when I was 20, I started doing yoga because I thought, well, maybe this is a way for me to work through, to detox. I really just wanted to detox back then. I wanted to just, be a better soccer player. But 17 years later, I'm now a yoga teacher and I've traveled the world several times alone. It sounds really funny to say it, but to explore who I am, to become aware of who I am. And I think that's a big part, a huge part of why people are so unhappy today is because we've lost sight of who we are and what we're here to do and our purpose. And passion projects, consistently across a lot of these people that I've interviewed is that we have to have a purpose. We have to have some sense of fulfillment, an authentic fulfillment, because there's a study done recently that says that only 13% of us are actually excited about what we do for our work. 13%. And that's what we do a third of our lives. So it's pretty sad that the other 87% are just kind of walking around going through the motions, like zombies almost. So I saw that, and there's a whole bunch, there's so many other things that go into it, but that's sort of what started all of this is that when I went through my own depression and I had some suicidal thoughts too, I went, oh boy, I need to do something about it. If I'm feeling this way and I've got a lot of things going for me, then the majority of the rest of us are feeling this way too, and I can feel it and see it, and I want to do something about it.
Yeah, and it's finding your purpose is so key. I started doing like pre-med classes and wanted to be a doctor when I was younger. And I wish I had pursued that route because that was my real purpose was medicine, health, helping people. And I thought, no, I'm not going to make any money doing that. So I started to pursue the almighty dollar and go into business. And I
Right.
was not chasing that dollar. Never did not make me happy. And finally, I came back at 37 to what I really wanted to do and listened to my heart and found my purpose, which was becoming a health practitioner, a doctor. It doesn't matter. Just wanted to help people and do it in health and medicine. And so I was able to find my purpose. But you have to spend time finding yourself. But let's talk a little bit about depression and some scary statistics on depression.
Oh, yeah. Right now, depression it's not just something that adults are experiencing. It's not just something that people who are in the workforce are experiencing. It is pretty much chronic. And in fact, I did some research because I thought, you look at Americans and you think Americans are the most obese. We take the most prescription drugs. We are the most overworked. But then there's other parts of the world too, like in China, they're the most overworked, and they're actually have, I can't remember what it's called, but they actually have something coined for it where they work so much that they are dropping dead at work. And it's like, oh, no big deal. It's just, we work a lot. That's just kind of the way it is. Or maybe it was Japan. I can't remember. But it's more common in other countries to overwork themselves to death, and it's more accepted there actually. Africa is another place where there's more depression, in the Middle East as well. But America, the statistics here, and they're changing, they're evolving. What's really crazy, Wendy, and I'll get into the statistics in a second, is that I have 3 assistants that have been working to help me with on the summit. And one of them, I just hired her recently, and yesterday she was supposed to be doing a lot of the work since we were just launching. And my other assistant who manages her said, oh, she can't do anything today because she's being held up by gunpoint right now. What? And I went, please tell me it's not someone who forgot to take their meds. And she's like, yep.
Oh, wow.
So I went, this is so ironic that, some of my projects are getting pushed back because one of my assistants who's working on the project for and with me, for the very reason that I have a lot of passion around, is that we are over medicated and we're going about it the wrong way by shoving antidepressants down these people's throats instead of listening to them and maybe writing a prescription for yoga or getting like an hour out in nature or making more love or hugging a friend or looking into the eyes of a dog for long periods and increasing oxytocin. Like, what kind of work have we done other than dwell on the past of, maybe their trauma and continue to reignite that wound? Maybe we can just how healthy are you? How toxic, Wendy? Like with your patients, student and clients, how toxic are you? What things that are blocking you? So anyway, the statistics are currently that it's hovering around 10 to 14% of people are taking antidepressants. And right now, one out of every 4 women in their 40s and 50s is on antidepressants. My mom was actually prescribed antidepressant for some migraine stuff that she had and some menopausal symptoms. So they're being prescribed for things outside of just depression. And that is, what they're estimating because it's decreasing inflammation. And inflammation is a big, what they're purporting to be a big, huge reason right now for depression. And if you look at, the obesity and overweight crisis of America, a third of us are obese, a third of us are overweight. Well, that's inflammation. And so that inflammation is a lot of pressure on our joints and our nerves. And so things can't get where they're supposed to be. Toxins get trapped. We're malnourished, absorbed, we're dehydrated. So that's part of it. So we're not exploring those first. Instead, we're handing out these antidepressants like candy that have more long-term side effects than help. And more of it's being, purported to be placebo now than anything. And right now, I found this to be really, really, really daunting, is that in 2010, the average teen in the United States was taking 1.2 central nervous systems drugs. 1.2. So that means that the average teen is taking some kind of drug that's altering their mood, which then they're getting behind the wheel and they're drinking and they're compounding that. And so when you look at these numbers, what percentage of them is actually working? When I interviewed Dr. Dan Kalish, I believe he was the one that said that, there's only like 2 to 5% of us who really, antidepressants really does help us. And the other 95% are experiencing long-term negative side effects. So, that being said, what can we do instead? Because then you've got these crazy people that are off their meds and they end up worse off than if they would have just taking care of themselves and the root cause issue to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think meds should be last resort. I, decided to go down that route many, many, many years ago, like 15 years ago. I tried Lexapro and did it for a year. I didn't really notice any much of a difference and got off of it. And wow, that was hell for 3 weeks. Getting off that, just anxiety through the roof, and I can see why people stay on it. They don't want to get off because that was one of the most unpleasant 3 weeks of my life, and I needed to tend to my diet and take nutritional supplements and work on mindset and what perception you're having about yourself and your life. And there's so many other things to it, like you said. I agree. Meds should be last resort.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, on that note, I forgot to mention this too, Wendy. Sorry to interrupt, but not sorry, because this is something that people need to hear. Is that when they did studies on these antidepressants, and there's a lot of different, you're going to find a whole bunch of different things on the internet on one side versus the other. But it is said that about 95% of the experimental medicines that the pharmaceutical industry produces are found not to be safe and never approved. And then of the remaining 5% that are approved, we often don't find out that they're deadly to us until decades later. And we are experiencing symptoms like you are. And another study just came out that showed that women who are in their third trimester of bearing a child, and they're on antidepressants, that they've got like an 87% chance that their baby will be born to autism. And there's a whole bunch of studies coming out, but the rates of autism are increasing. We have to question why. And of course, autism is a central nervous system issue. And so what's going on here? Is that inflammation too? There's so much to uncover here, but I don't believe that leaning heavily on pharmaceuticals to get through the fast-paced demands of life is the best way of going about it.
and I find a lot of people find it doesn't work. I mean, I
Yeah.
know many, many people that they go on an antidepressant, doesn't work. The doctor writes them a script. Oh, let's add another one. Doctor writes
Right.
a script for another one. Oh, now I can't sleep. Then they get a prescription for Xanax or another benzodiazepine, and then they get a prescription for an antipsychotic, and they're on like 5 meds. And it's just insanity. And these people, they are a train wreck. I mean, they are emotionally bankrupt and, in horrible mental condition. It makes me really angry.
And
Because, yeah.
sexually bankrupt too. I interviewed a sex expert too for the Heart to Happiness Summit, and oxytocin that's our love connection hormone, and that is most produced during orgasm and connection and sex and lovemaking. And of course, looking into the eyes of each other and hugging and those sorts of things. But bonding and being vulnerable and our creative space, that's what produces oxytocin. So it's like you get these people on antidepressants and they can't produce, so to speak. When it comes time to make love, they're having a hard time getting sexually aroused, and then they can't, and then they're depressed because of that. Mm-hmm. And then they take another drug so that then they're on testosterone. It's like, it's not to get too far that direction, because it's affecting multiple people in multiple ways. Children even are being prescribed antidepressants. But if we can't love ourselves, it's hard to make love or love other people too. And if we're robbed of oxytocin, we're sure as heck robbed of happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that same side effect too. It was really strange, a very odd side effect of it.
Oh, it's humiliating, isn't it? It's like, what's going on down here?
Yeah, and let's talk about the power of vulnerability and the courage to show up as ourselves. I think a lot of people today, they're afraid to be themselves, and you really have to kind of burst through that. And Americans, we tend to be very individualistic, all about letting individuals shine and be themselves. But I think a lot of people still have a hard time allowing themselves to do that.
Yeah, this is probably the heaviest hitter. Is courage, right? Courage to be seen. And the work of Brene Brown, I believe, is revolutionizing humans, period. Her thing, and if you guys don't know who she is, you could do a simple Google search, Brene Brown TED Talk. You could spell it wrong and you'll find a whole bunch of videos to watch. And they're very humbling. They hit home, they hit straight to the heart. And she and Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, are two powerhouses in this topic. I myself, when I started listening to these videos, found myself hearing me judge myself and then questioning, who is this voice? Who is it inside of me that's judging myself? And if you really think about it, there's such a tiny percentage of of our past that we may have been traumatized by, like that one bully. You know, if we come across 1,000 people in a month time period and there's one bully that has made our life hell, that's like 0.1%. And we're letting that 0.1% incident govern 100% of our life. Maybe not 100%, but it's always that voice in the back of our head that's like, remember the last time you showed up as yourself, or remember the last time that you celebrated something and you were excited and they told you that, you know, oh, how dare you, you know, celebrate your own victory, you know, like stop being so conceited. Like, why are you showing off? Like, wait a second, that's not showing off. It should be okay to celebrate the things that we create authentically. Like, it's like, you know, this little heart that I made for my mom here. You know, it would be like, you would be a bully. Diane, that's so stupid. Why would you have made that? Why didn't you do something else? You know, the new me would be like, who are you judging inside? I'm so sorry that you feel that way about yourself. Like, who hurt you so bad that you feel as though what I'm doing is wrong because you're too afraid to do it yourself? So the new way of looking at things is not when other people are criticizing us for showing up as ourselves. The new way of looking at it is to spin it and think, God, that person I feel so bad for that person. They are so hard on themselves because the way they're talking to me is not my problem. That's how they talk to themselves. That's kind of like the evolved when you get through this fear and paralysis of showing up as yourself. You get to this point where you realize this is going to happen for the rest of our lives. People are always going to be judging us. It's everywhere. But where did it come from? I don't have to entertain that voice. And what is my opportunity cost for not showing up as myself? In other words, yeah, what am I not getting for being myself?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I always think to myself, you know, no one gave me my happiness and no one can take it away from me unless I let them. You know,
Power.
that's like a mantra I kind of tell myself a lot. But, you know, there's some alarming stats, you know, on how most people describe happiness today. And why is that a major issue?
Oh God, it's this is another one that really they've done studies on the younger generation, and so the big percentage of the younger generation. I'm looking for the statistics here because I put them somewhere, but the younger generation really describes. I don't know if you've heard the study, Wendy, that Princeton did this one. They've shown that you only find happiness with money and income to a certain point. And, you know, people think, oh, if I had $1 million, you know, there's that line. If I had $1 million and, you know, I'm developing a happiness quiz, you know, for the 7 key areas of wellness, you know, be it physical or spiritual or, you know, emotional, whatever the aspect is of that shapes our happiness, because it is a formula and it's different for each person. So I'm developing a quiz for that. But a part of that, you know, it's okay to seek financial security. It's okay to want money. But one of the questions is if you had $1 million, what would your life change? How would your life change? And if you're like, you know, I wouldn't change too much, then you're a pretty content person. But if you know, are out on a binge and if you think about cars, you're thinking about vacations, and if you're living in excess, it means that you're currently thinking in lack. You're operating out of a hardwired system that is lack. There's not enough of something rather than abundance. I already have of everything I need. So if I got $1 million, it's not going to change anything because I'm already happy the way I am. Maybe I'll get something, you know, maybe I'll buy something for my mom or whatever. But the Princeton study showed that we can only find happiness with money and income to a certain point, and that threshold is $70,000. Any more that we make marginally on top of that is not bringing us that much more happiness. In other words, the bell curve is like happiness increases up to that point, and then after that point, there's not much more happiness that it brings us. So that's the misconception that is driven by our corporate world. That, you know, the spend this, buy that. You need this skirt to look, to get, to be asked out on a date, buy, to marry. You know, we don't need any of those things. To live a basic life is to live a very happy life now. And the youth, the millennials right now, this is a Harvard study done, Harvard happiness study, and they found that 80% of them think that being rich and 50% think being famous is the answer to happiness. Imagine our future if 80% of millennials thinking that it's about money and 50% thinking it's about fame.
Yeah, and I think children watching media, watching, you know, just all of our reality television and television shows, that's the message they're getting. And that's why they think that way. I think children that grow up not watching media, like in the Waldorf school system or what have you, they tend to be much happier and much well-rounded when they don't get those constant message of you have to wear the brands and you have to be rich and famous and whatnot. But I grew up, 30 years ago, and I had that same thought instilled in my head, very, I guess, American cultural thing or ideation. But I thought I had to have money to be happy, and it definitely did not work out that way.
Yeah, what do you think for you? Where do you think for you when you outgrew that, where you're like, you know what, it's not the way society, it's not all these lies outside of me, it's in here. Like, what was there one period? Was there like a point where everything came crashing down and you just rose above? Because I find that a lot of people have this point where they like everything crashes, and then
Yeah.
on the other side, you're like, whoa, I lived through that,
Yeah.
and it's not that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe when I was 35, I was selling real estate. I was selling homes. I was making $20,000 a month. I was making a ton of money, and I was suicidal. I had a few bad times there where I was just miserable, and I had been, just going out a lot and just trying to escape from myself and really making a lot of bad decisions, and finally I got really, really sick of that, and I decided to make some changes. It was just because I was pursuing money. I was doing something I hated to make money, and I hated my identity. And so then I finally decided to go into health and start studying that more, especially as when my father got sick, and that just kind of parlayed me back on my original path, was on health. And then I'm very, very happy today
Yeah, you know
as a
what?
result.
That's sort of what I did too, Wendy. It was like I became a financial planner. I was working for Merrill Lynch. I thought, being a stockbroker, it was so sexy to make a lot of money and to write a $46,000 check for my very first car when I was 22. Ooh, look at me, I'm independent. Look at me, I don't need you. I got my big panties on, my big girl panties on. It's like, who am I trying? What am I trying to prove to who? Like,
Yeah.
where did this even come from? And once you start to question that, like, who are these voices in my head, and why am I allowing them real estate? Speaking to a former real estate person, why am I? They're not even paying me for this real estate, but yet they're governing most of my decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess that's obviously why you decided to focus on happiness for your event. So you could have done a huge online event about anything, about nutrition or whatever, because you work with clients doing nutrition and detoxes at FDN. So why did you choose happiness?
Yeah, it's this was going against, a lot of the trainers that I work with now. I train people, people train me, and they say, focus on what you're most passionate about right now. And while focusing on happiness seems kind of elusive, and it's sort of general, right? So it's like, gosh, and one side of me was like, I need to niche this deeper, like happy women or happy children or happy. And I went, no, because everyone deserves to hear this. And I've never seen an approach that takes everything into consideration instead of just focusing on antidepressants or like depression. This isn't about depression. This is about being happier, and what are the roadblocks to that. So while my role is not, a happy nutritionist, I believe that, like me, you and I work with people getting the crap out of their lives, and so that they can be free and happy and clear and energetic. But myself, I'm thinking, I'm plagued. I'm not happy. I went through a breakup, a really harsh breakup. My aunt died of cancer. Two of my very best friends went into rehab. I helped them into rehab, one of whom I was living with. And, heroin, hard things, not just weed. There's not even just escaping from, with alcohol. It became that the people that were close to me in my life were using things outside of themselves to numb. And then there was another person a lot of my friends on antidepressants. And like you said, that let's try this antidepressant, let's try this one. And I knew their story, because when we heal people like you and I do, they kind of unleash the things that are going on with them psychologically as well. And I just heard the same story over and over again. And when my aunt died of cancer, and she was a nurse, and she first got diagnosed with breast cancer when she was a nurse, and she was running the show, and she was managing several other nurses. And what really got to her, and what I asked her when she first was diagnosed with breast cancer, what bothered her the most in her life was that she couldn't speak her truth. She felt claustrophobic. There's many things she couldn't say. So she couldn't show up as herself. And as such, there's a lot of energy that goes into being someone who we're not. There's a lot of masks, there's a lot of lies, there's a lot of contradictions, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of restlessness. And we can't connect to other people when we're not connected to ourselves. And so I just kept seeing that over and over again. And then eventually when everybody else is around you and they're coming to you for support, you you get depressed yourself. It hit me hard when my aunt died. That was the point where I went, I'm doing this for her. And I was at my parents' house like I am now in the backyard. And heart to happiness just made sense because the path to happiness is through our hearts and it's not through our checkbook.
Yeah, and so you interviewed, 20 plus experts from all kinds of fields, ranging from psychotherapists and attorneys turn passion, chasing authors to environmentalists and fit moms. So why that, huge range? Why did you, or how did you come to handpick the experts that you did?
Yeah, because there is that formula, right? That there's a formula there's so many different things that go into our happiness equation. So there's social, there's emotional, there's spiritual, there's financial, there's occupational, there's intellectual, and then there's physical. And so for someone, they might say, and like I shared this statistic earlier, maybe I didn't, I can't remember because I had so many interviews already, but oh yeah, I think I did. 13% of us are genuinely happy with what we're doing. And for the most part, those people are in the service of helping others. So like you and I, we're in the service of helping other people. So the more we give, the more we get. And, that's why, a lot of the people who I've interviewed have said that, if I'm feeling deficient in happiness, I give to other people because I get that back. So there's the occupational piece, and that's Tama Keeves. And she was an attorney and she was miserable and she was working many hours. And people today are finding it so sexy to say, oh, I was working till 2 a.m. Look at me. Well, great. Well, you pretty much just lost about 20 years of testosterone. Like you're not sleeping. So it's not bragging rights. It's not sexy anymore to overwork ourselves. We can't even be here to brag about working ourselves that many hours if we're not taking care of ourselves, right? So I saw everybody's formula is going to be led by something different. So if somebody is a very emotional being, then they are, and that would be, let's just say females, we're more emotional. And so we connect deeper when we're emotional and we're able to express it and we're able to interpret other people's emotions without judgment. And we're able to hold space for each other and be there for one another and just free of judgment, free of ridicule, free of trying to label and pigeonhole. And so for women, it might be more emotional wellness that is their number one. And so we need to make sure that we're healthy in that regard, that we're able to express and receive and feel that we deserve receiving love as well. Because it's a big problem today. We as women don't know if we feel like we deserve love either. So how do you accept a compliment? Oh, you look beautiful. Oh, my hair looks like crap. Are you kidding me? Well, you just rejected love. And if you're rejecting love from other people, you certainly are cutting yourself off from your own love. So what's going on there? And then for, let's just say men, they're going to pride themselves more so in occupational and financial. But, the genders are kind of crossing now. Like more women are more manly and more men are becoming more sensitive. And we're kind of lost in our genders anymore. But that's okay because we have both sides. So I'm kind of, making some assumptions here. And maybe traditional ones, but financial and occupational, maybe men they pride themselves on being grounded and having a title and doing well and thriving in that. And for a lot of men now, I love this one is we're shooting all over ourselves. Shooting. I should do this. I should do this. I should do that. Before I get into a relationship, I should do this, or I should have done it that way. And then we have all this regret of in the past. And so for a lot of guys, they won't engage in relationships until they get into this space where they're proud of themselves financially, occupationally, where they have this title. And so everybody's just kind of in this until and when I get to this point, then I. And so people are, like the guys especially, are shitting all over themselves. I can't get into a relationship when I don't have a firm income. And I see people commonly saying, I'm finally in a place where I am open to get into a relationship. It's like, why would we ever reject love? That should be the number one driving force of our existence. That's why we're here, is to connect. And so then there's the physical wellness. And of course, I've seen a lot of people who are doing really well emotionally, financially, creatively, occupationally, but then they've got like, their spine is blocked, or it's, I work with chiropractors, so maybe it's twisted and they can't get nutrients to where they should be. And then you and I work with people in toxicity and amino acids and vitamin deficiencies and mineral imbalances and hormonal, and frequencies, and then heavy metal toxicity. So that's important. And then how are we treating the planet? If you're someone flinging your cigarette butt out or throwing plastic water bottles everywhere, then you're shitting on the planet. But if you're treating the planet that way, then how are you treating yourself? So there's so much that goes into happiness. And then spirituality is a huge one too. Very few people are actually taking the time to just become still and quiet and aware of even just their breath. Like, who am I? Who am I? The purpose is so important. So I can keep going on and on. I have 24 people who talked about it, but that's probably the briefest summary I could answer in that question.
Well, you come up with a formula about, how someone can find their own personal happiness, or their own personal formula for happiness. How did you come up with that?
Yeah. So I actually came up with it because of amazing people like yourself, Wendy. So when I did these interviews, I took a lot of notes, and I have one of my assistants is taking arduous notes on a lot of what people said. And what we found to be true across, and I'm not done with this research yet, but what we found to be true across all of these areas was very consistent answers. And in each person's explanation of happiness with their specialty, like you are physical wellness, because you talked about physical wellness and how toxicity can block us from us being physically healthy. And so I listened to that, and then through my own experience and doing research from other doctors, and my field is physical wellness too. And I've been involved in every one of these every one of these 7 key areas, whether it's my own personal experience or working with other doctors. And so I've established that based on the studies, based on other types of quizzes that were done that were not. There's nothing been done like this, but how would you define happiness? And gurus, because I traveled to India and Thailand and traveled alone and listened to these people talk. So a lot of my yogic practice and tantra practices have gone into this as well. Like, what is wellness? I've been trained for many, many hours in the spiritual sense. So I'm pretty well versed in a lot of these things through experience, and also because I've gotten a lot of certifications in them. And so it's a very delicate formula, but I'm weighing the top things that I've heard people mention, and what I see the most deficient in society as a whole.
Well, tell us about the project, the summit, the Heart to Happiness Summit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So,
and like how it's transformed your life.
Yeah. Okay. So there's things that I set out for others to grasp from this. And I really just wanted every speaker to have their own reign of how do you define happiness? What do you see in your practice, in your industry, of what's blocking people from happiness? And what steps? I asked each speaker to give 3 takeaways, 3 exercises, 3 biggest impact, easiest to do things that people can see progress right now. Because we're Americans, we're impatient, or I would just say that we're earthlings, because we all live this fast-paced life for the most part. But we like to see results now. And if we don't, we give up and blame it on the system that didn't work. So every person I interviewed, I asked for 3 heavy hitters. What can they do right now? So among 24 experts, you've got 3 takeaways. That's like 75 different takeaways that you can pick at least one from and run with it. And so I set forth to help people, whatever they needed to hear, they're going to hear it. Because I've even interviewed a 4th grader in this, and he's a 4th grader entrepreneur, and he's relentless, and he has more courage than the majority of adults that I know. So there's something to learn from him too. He's doing some amazing things, and so I brought him on so people can, no matter what age. And the things I learned for myself in my life, it's so crazy, Wendy. I used to come home from working out. I used to work out later, and then it was like 6, 7 o'clock at night. I'd come home from yoga. I'd come home from working out, and I'm like, okay, I got work to do. And I literally wake up in the morning and I'd work, and then I'd take a break and work out. I'd come home from my workout and I'd work. And so I was working from like 8 a.m. to like midnight. And that was just my life. And listening to these speakers, heard them, the number one thing I heard everybody say is, you gotta block out time for you. You have to block out time to be creative. And that's what the work of Brene Brown says, that the best way to exercise being vulnerable and showing up as ourselves and really finding happiness is to spend time alone, spend time creating, doing the things that we really enjoy doing. What people go, oh, I'm not creative. I can't draw. I can't paint. Oh, I can't do any of that stuff. I'm not creative. We all have creative in us. We just may have been at a young age bullied, or someone told us that our work sucked, and then we just stopped doing it. So there's that 0.1% that has prevented us from getting into our heart space and creating because we're afraid of that 0.1% again. And so creating and taking time for ourselves, enjoying just being in nature, to listen to the birds, to not feel the anxiety about the day ahead of us, to not wake up and obsessively check emails, I used to roll over in the morning and just look at all my emails. Like, what do I have to do today? What do I have to jump out of bed for? Instead, I wake up in the morning and I'm listening to the birds and I'm like, this is my time. I'm just right here. I'm right here. I'm not dwelling in I'm not shooting on myself because I should have done it this way. And I'm not needing on myself, like I need to do this. I'm just right here. Like here, right now is good. It's perfect. It is the only time that exists. And so the space to just be without being without is what's really healed me, is that I've heard people say that take time for yourself, create, do things you love. So now I'm scuba diving more regularly. I didn't scuba dive for 6 months. I took a break and now I've got my gear and I'm diving again. I'm salsa dancing. I've never done it before. That's one of the top 10 things that you could do to be unhappy, is to not take risk, is to live in your comfort zone. So getting outside of your comfort zone is one of the paths to happiness. And so I'm taking risks. I'm doing things. I'm more afraid, I realize, salsa dancing, of judgment from other people than I am of diving in open waters with sharks, which I've done. And so I went, why do I care so much about what other people think? And the more you exercise getting out in the public eye and doing things, and you hear people go, God, it's just so fun to see you enjoy yourself. And then in your head, you may be thinking, but I felt like I looked like crap doing that dance move and I almost rolled my ankle and fell on my face. But the person that saw me on the opposite side of the room came to me and said, it was so fun watching you enjoy yourself. What a contrast.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that's a great story. And, I really enjoyed my interview with you. I really love your energy. And
Thanks, man.
yeah, and I know that like you interviewed like a fourth grader, and there's going to be so many interesting interviews on this summit. So tell people when they can check out the summit. It's coming up pretty quickly, isn't it?
Yes. It's coming up May 16th. And I think it was June 4th that you're on. Yeah, you're on June 4th. And you're toward the end too. So we saved the best for last. June 8th is when it's over. And so people can watch what it is. It's, people who know the summit model, you could watch the videos for free the whole time. And I'm sending out emails every day to people so that they know which one's up. Each person's up for 72 hours. So they can watch you from June 4th. You'll be up 4th, 5th, and 6th. And then at the end, we may have a little encore where you can kind of catch up. And then at the end of it, there's going to be that quiz so people can take notes throughout. They can try incorporating these things day to day. And of course, every speaker that I've interviewed, there's going to be a link to go to their website so they can learn more about them. They can reach out to them. They can learn more about you in our interview. But there's so much to it. So I would encourage people to be as much involved as they can and to check out the current website and the video so they can see what speakers are a part of it, who they've, I even have one of the top doctors who's a psychiatrist who talks about addiction. And so there's addiction, there's eating disorders, there's sexual confusion, there's everything. There's everything that you can imagine there that would block us from our happiness. Yeah. So, get in there and the courage to come to this. I want to give you guys, I want to give you guys a pass. A VIP pass, because this really it's tough. It's the hardest thing to go inside of yourself and admit that maybe you've gone about it the wrong way. Maybe at one point you've been living your life people pleasing. And instead of shaming yourself for that and shooting all over yourself, accept that that's been your journey and that where you are, you're in that perfect moment and you were supposed to be here watching me and Wendy today. You're supposed to be watching me and Wendy on June 4th or any of the other speakers. So just be gentle on yourself when you're watching these things, because you may hear people talk and then you think, oh, dang it, I knew I should have done it that way, or why am I not? And then we start getting in our head and it's like, no, these are supposed to be empowering. So open yourself up to learn and realize that failure is the biggest and the best part of all of this.
And anyone who's successful or happy, it was not an upward trajectory. It was like all over the place to get to
Total
that point.
zigzag, lots of scars and scratches.
Yeah. Well, Diane, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And listeners, if you want to learn more about me, you can go to live to110.com and learn about my healing and detox program at mineralpower.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Live to 110 podcast.
Thank you, Wendy.
Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Well, I came to this field. It's a second career for me. I was a professional pianist and conductor and musician, and I was as out of shape and unhealthy as you might imagine somebody who came up in the sex, drugs, and rock and roll era of Woodstock would be. I thought a healthy breakfast was coffee and an aspirin and around 11 o'clock in the morning. So I was pretty much of a hot mess in terms of my health. And with not much of an interest in health or nutrition or any of this stuff. I was a smoker. I'm addicted to, everybody knows this already. It's pretty common. I've been addicted to every drug in the PDR, physician's desk reference. I mean, if it's something bad for you, I've probably done it. And that has served me very well in my work, which we'll get to in a second. So late 80s, I'm traveling around the country conducting shows, doing off-Broadway and Broadway touring companies, and you get really bored. And, the actors, it's their job to stay in shape. So these guys, all men and women, they know what to do in the gym. They know what to do with weights. And one day, out of total boredom, I just said to one of the actors, Mike, teach me how to lift these weights things. I think, well, maybe I'll try to lose some of this belly. And if you look back at pictures of me, then I looked like probably 20 years older than I look now. And so I began kind of lifting weights, and I, like many people who came to a career in health and fitness as a second calling, got really bitten by the bug and became something of a zealot. And I just started to see the changes that went on in my own body, started to see the weight come off, my energy improve. And I was not, Wendy, one of these people who had an epiphany and changed their life. I was the guy that would go to the gym, do a couple of sets of bench press, and go out and smoke a cigarette in between sets. So it was a long process to change all these different things, give up drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, and as I began to do this and began to see as an experiment on myself what was possible by changing one's diet and lifestyle choices gradually, very gradually, I point out this was a couple-year process, I really just became a zealot. And being a kind of middle-class Jewish New Yorker, academically oriented, overachieving, the first thing I thought of is, I wonder if I can get a degree in this stuff, because, you immediately want to find some kind of credential that makes what you're learning authentic or respected. And so I was kind of an education junkie anyway. I had a master's degree in psychology, a bachelor's in music. And so I started collecting certifications as a personal trainer. So I went out and got one. I said, this is phenomenal. I love this stuff. I think I want another one. And I ultimately collected 6 of them. And this is still stuff that I'm kind of doing as a hobby. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, getting certified in personal training and aerobics, that would look really good on a Broadway playbill. That's really sexy. Well, in addition to being a conductor, he's also a well-known,